Most people live their entire lives chasing approval without realizing it. From the way we dress, talk, post online, or even make decisions, we're quietly asking for permission to be ourselves. It's exhausting and it never ends because the more we chase approval, the less we actually feel confident. But there's a way out. There's a mindset that breaks this cycle completely. This isn't about becoming cold or careless. It's about finally taking back control of your peace and your self-respect. So let's talk about how to never need approval again. The first step is awareness, and it is the foundation of every real change that happens within you. Most people walk through life on autopilot, unaware of how often they seek validation from others. They don't notice how frequently they modify their behavior just to avoid judgment or gain approval. It's hidden in the smallest actions: how you hesitate before saying what you think, how you smile politely when someone crosses your boundaries, how you second guess a decision because you're worried about what someone might think. These moments seem harmless, but together they create a pattern that shapes your identity around the opinions of others. Awareness is what breaks that pattern. It's the light that reveals how deeply the need for approval has been running your life. When you begin to see it clearly, you start to separate your true self from your approval-seeking self. You realize that many of your choices have been made not out of authenticity, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of being seen as less than enough. That fear disguises itself as politeness, humility, or cooperation, but deep down, it's still fear. Awareness calls it out for what it is. Once you start noticing it, everything changes. You become conscious of how often you edit your words in conversations, how often you hold back your emotions to avoid conflict, how often you agree just to be accepted. You start to hear the inner dialogue that says, "Don't say that, they'll think you're rude," or "Don't wear that, they'll judge you." That voice loses power the moment you realize it's not truth, it's conditioning. Awareness helps you understand that your brain has learned to associate approval with safety, as if being liked means being secure. This comes from childhood, from moments when acceptance meant belonging and belonging meant survival. But now, as an adult, that same programming keeps you small, keeps you careful, keeps you disconnected from who you really are. Awareness exposes that illusion. It reminds you that being liked and being fulfilled are not the same thing. As awareness deepens, you begin to observe your own patterns without shame. You notice the triggers that make you seek validation, the silence after sharing your opinion, the disapproval in someone's expression, the fear of disappointing someone you respect. Instead of reacting, you pause. That pause is power. It gives you space to choose differently. Instead of rushing to explain yourself, you let the silence stand. Instead of apologizing for your feelings, you let them be valid. That's awareness in action. It transforms automatic reactions into intentional responses. You start to see that needing approval was never about weakness. It was about misunderstanding where your worth comes from. Awareness teaches you that your value doesn't increase when someone compliments you, and it doesn't decrease when someone criticizes you. It's constant, steady, untouched by external opinion. The more aware you become, the more freedom you feel. You no longer chase validation because you can see the pattern playing out in real time. You recognize the emotional exhaustion that comes from trying to please everyone and realize it's not worth the cost. You begin to experiment with honesty, with saying what you actually mean, with showing how you really feel, with being unapologetically yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Each time you do, the pull of approval weakens a little more. You discover that people's reactions are not reflections of your value. They're reflections of their own perceptions, expectations, and insecurities. Awareness lets you stand in that truth without needing to fix it. It teaches you that your job isn't to manage how others see you, but to stay connected to how you see yourself. The second step is boundaries, and this is where awareness becomes action. Once you see how much of your peace is sacrificed for approval, you start to understand why boundaries are not just necessary, but non negotiable. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you from others. They are lines that define where you end and where someone else begins. They are the quiet but firm message that says your time, your emotions, and your energy have value. Without boundaries, people will take as much as you allow them to, not always out of malice, but because you have not shown them how to treat you. Boundaries are how you teach people to respect you, and more importantly, how you remind yourself that you deserve respect. When you don't set them, you end up living in a constant state of resentment, doing things you don't want to do, saying yes when your body screams no, smiling when you want to walk away. You become overextended, underappreciated, and emotionally drained, and then you wonder why peace feels impossible. Boundaries fix that by creating space for honesty and self-respect to exist. When you first start setting boundaries, it feels uncomfortable. You've spent so long equating kindness with compliance that saying no feels like an act of rebellion. You worry people will think you're selfish or rude. That fear is exactly why boundaries are so hard for approval seekers, because they challenge the identity built on being agreeable. But every time you say no to something that doesn't align with you, you are saying yes to your self-worth. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling your access to peace. They are a declaration that you value your well-being enough to protect it. People who are used to your constant yes may resist. They may question you, guilt trip you, or accuse you of changing. And they're right, you are changing. You're finally realizing that you don't need to overextend yourself to be loved. Love that depends on self-sacrifice isn't love. It's manipulation disguised as affection. Boundaries strip that illusion away and reveal who truly respects you. The beauty of boundaries is that they simplify your life. You no longer waste energy explaining yourself or seeking validation for your decisions. You start to respond with calm confidence instead of over-explaining or apologizing. You begin to say things like, "That doesn't work for me," or "I'm not available," and you leave it at that. The moment you stop defending your boundaries, they start to work. The people who truly care will adjust, and those who only valued what they could take from you will fall away. This process can feel lonely at first, but it's not loneliness, it's clarity. It's the space where self-respect grows. You begin to realize that boundaries don't push away the right people, they filter out the wrong ones. As you practice setting them, something powerful happens inside you. You start trusting yourself again. Every time you honor your limits, you rebuild that broken trust that approval-seeking destroyed. You stop betraying your own needs to keep others comfortable. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop trying to be everything for everyone. You learn that saying no doesn't make you difficult. It makes you disciplined. Boundaries turn emotional chaos into order because they give structure to your self-worth. They remind you that you are responsible for your happiness, and no one else will protect your peace if you don't. Boundaries are the foundation of freedom because they shift your focus from pleasing others to respecting yourself. They are not a rejection of love, but an invitation to healthier connection, one built on authenticity instead of approval. The third step is self-validation, and it is the step that transforms everything from the inside out. When you live your life depending on others for validation, you give them silent power over your emotions. Every compliment lifts you, every criticism breaks you, and your sense of self-worth swings like a pendulum based on what people think. Self-validation is the process of taking that power back. It means you stop outsourcing your confidence to other people's opinions and start building it from within. Most people have never learned how to do this because they were conditioned to earn approval through grades, performance, appearance, or obedience. Somewhere along the way, they learned that being good meant being accepted, and being accepted meant being worthy. That belief runs deep, and it makes you chase validation without even realizing it. Self-validation breaks that loop by teaching you to be the one who approves of yourself first. It's the ability to look in the mirror and know that you are enough even when no one notices, applauds, or agrees. Self-validation doesn't mean arrogance. It means balance. It's about acknowledging your efforts, your growth, and your emotions without needing anyone else to confirm them. When you achieve something, instead of waiting for someone to praise you, you take a moment to appreciate your own progress. When you make a mistake, instead of tearing yourself apart, you remind yourself that learning is part of growth. When you feel hurt or frustrated, you don't dismiss it. You validate it. You tell yourself it's okay to feel that way because your emotions are real and deserve recognition. This practice creates emotional stability because your sense of worth stops depending on the unpredictable reactions of others. You no longer feel desperate for reassurance because you've learned how to provide it for yourself. That is true independence, not financial or physical, but emotional. At first, it feels unnatural. If you've spent your life relying on others to tell you you're good enough, self-validation can feel empty, like words that don't carry weight. But the more you practice, the more powerful it becomes. You begin to notice how often you look outward for approval, posting something online and checking for likes, seeking agreement in conversations, waiting for someone to notice your effort. Each time you catch yourself doing it, you gently remind yourself that external validation is temporary, but self-validation is lasting. You tell yourself that pride doesn't come from applause, it comes from authenticity. You realize that confidence isn't loud, it's quiet, calm, and rooted in self-trust. The power of self-validation is that it builds an internal sense of worth that no one can touch. When you trust yourself, other people's opinions lose their grip. Criticism no longer shatters you, and praise no longer defines you. You can take feedback without feeling attacked because you know your value doesn't depend on it. You can make bold decisions without waiting for permission because you trust your instincts. You can stand alone in your truth even when it's unpopular because you know you're standing for something real. This is what emotional freedom looks like when you no longer chase approval, but instead give yourself the validation you once begged others for. You stop trying to earn your worth and start living it. Every time you choose to believe in yourself without external evidence, you strengthen the foundation of self-respect that approval-seeking once eroded. Self-validation is not a single act. It's a daily commitment to treating yourself with the same understanding, patience, and compassion you've always given to others. The next key is releasing control of perception, because one of the deepest roots of approval seeking is the illusion that you can manage how others see you. You spend so much energy trying to look perfect, sound perfect, and appear in control that you lose touch with who you actually are. You carefully craft your image, editing your words and emotions just to avoid being misunderstood or disliked. But no matter how hard you try, people will always see you through the lens of their own experiences, insecurities, and beliefs. You can do everything right and still be criticized, judged, or misinterpreted. The harder you try to control that, the more powerless you feel, because you're fighting a battle that can never be won. Releasing that control is one of the most liberating shifts you can ever make. It doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop letting their perception define your peace. You begin to understand that other people's opinions are not mirrors of your truth. They are merely reflections of their perspective. When you release the need to be seen a certain way, you create space for authenticity. You stop overthinking every move and start living more freely. You no longer shrink yourself to fit someone's expectations or pretend to be smaller so others feel comfortable. You stop performing and start existing. You let your words be honest instead of rehearsed. Your emotions be genuine instead of filtered. And what happens next is surprising. The world doesn't fall apart. In fact, it often becomes lighter, simpler, more peaceful. The anxiety that came from trying to please everyone slowly fades, replaced by a quiet strength that comes from being real. People may still judge you, but their judgment no longer holds power. You realize that what they think of you says more about them than it does about you. Some will misunderstand your silence as arrogance, your confidence as pride, your independence as rebellion, and that's okay. Because when you stop explaining yourself to be understood, you start to understand yourself better. The truth is, control over perception is an illusion built by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of being seen as flawed. But perfection was never the goal. It was the disguise. You thought if you could look perfect, you could avoid pain. But the reality is that perfection only creates distance between you and your own humanity. Releasing control is about reclaiming that humanity. It's about allowing yourself to be seen in your truth, even if that truth isn't always polished. You accept that you will make mistakes, you will have bad days, and you will disappoint people at times. And that doesn't make you less worthy. It makes you real. It makes you whole. Once you internalize this, you stop needing to chase impressions. You no longer tailor your life for the approval of people who don't even understand your journey. As you let go of controlling how others perceive you, you begin to experience real freedom, the kind that doesn't depend on image, reputation, or external validation. You start to act from intention rather than reaction. You say what aligns with your values, even if it isn't popular. You make decisions based on truth, not perception. And the irony is, when you stop trying to be liked, you become more respected. People can sense authenticity. They are drawn to it because it's rare. The same confidence that once came from controlling perception now comes from letting it go. You realize that peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from being understood by yourself. Releasing control of perception means giving yourself permission to live unfiltered, to speak your truth without needing everyone to agree, and to find comfort not in being seen perfectly, but in being seen honestly. The final step is purpose, because once you stop chasing approval and start building boundaries, awareness, and self-validation, you need something bigger to anchor your energy to. Purpose is what gives direction to your freedom. Without it, even the strongest person can fall back into the cycle of people-pleasing because the mind needs something to serve. And if it doesn't serve your purpose, it will start serving other people's opinions again. Purpose is the steady compass that reminds you why you're doing what you're doing, even when others don't understand or support you. It's not about having a grand plan or knowing your life's mission overnight. It's about living with intention, about knowing your values and moving toward them consistently. When you have purpose, you stop living reactively and you begin to live deliberately. Approval loses its hold because your focus shifts from being liked to being effective, from impressing people to making an impact, from being comfortable to being meaningful. Purpose gives weight to your actions, clarity to your choices, and peace to your heart. When you find purpose, it doesn't mean you suddenly stop caring about what others think. It means their opinions no longer control your path. You learn to filter feedback, taking what helps you grow and leaving what distracts you. You stop trying to meet every expectation because you finally have your own. The energy that once went into overthinking and seeking validation now goes into progress and creation. Purpose turns noise into background sound. You start to see challenges as part of your journey, not signs of failure. You begin to wake up with a sense of direction that no amount of external approval can provide. You work not to prove your worth, but to express it. You give because it aligns with your heart, not because you're afraid of losing love. Every decision becomes simpler when filtered through purpose, because it's no longer about making everyone happy. It's about staying true to what matters most. Purpose also transforms how you handle criticism and failure. When you're focused on approval, criticism feels personal. It stings because it threatens your identity. But when you're focused on purpose, criticism becomes feedback, something to learn from rather than something to fear. You stop seeing failure as proof of inadequacy and start seeing it as a step toward growth. Purpose gives your pain a place to belong. It turns setbacks into lessons and rejection into redirection. You start appreciating the process, even the difficult parts, because you know they are shaping you into who you're meant to be. This shift in mindset gives you resilience. It allows you to keep moving forward even when people doubt you, misunderstand you, or walk away from you, because purpose isn't about them, it's about your why. The deeper your sense of purpose grows, the quieter the need for validation becomes. You no longer crave applause because fulfillment starts coming from within. You realize that peace doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being aligned. You begin to enjoy solitude because it's in solitude that you hear your purpose the loudest. You stop competing, comparing, and over explaining because you know where you're going and why you're going there. Purpose makes you immune to shallow approval because it fills the space where insecurity used to live. It reminds you that you don't exist to be liked. You exist to contribute, to create, to evolve. And when your energy is driven by purpose, you naturally attract people who align with it. You become a magnet not because you seek attention, but because you embody conviction. Purpose gives you peace, direction, and the strength to live a life that doesn't require anyone's permission to be meaningful.